in order to be able to make everything cheaper, right? So the only way I think the government have been using is giving out grants, right? So the price remain, you keep the price, but then you make it more affordable for people to be able to buy. The demand by singles, right? I think they also try to accommodate them, but maybe not far enough, but they do try to accommodate them.
So let's take the 400,000 HDB flat, let's say at entry level. If you convert that into what is the rental terms that you lock in for 99 years, is $340. How is that expensive? Prepaid rent is also an asset in your accounting terms, right? Prepaid expense is an asset. Well, there's nothing wrong with that. The asset appreciation narrative still works in the sense that if the market rental continue to increase, then the rental times the number of remaining period can still increase, at least in the front end, right? Of course, towards the tail end, there will be the decay, but the decay is respecting the contract that you have signed. It's just focused on whether the price, let's say looking at it from a 99-year locked-in rent terms perspective, does it make sense?
Welcome back to part 2 of TFC Live, our GE special. Very happy to be here once again, to talk about some of the bigger topics, right? So I think over the course of the next few days, we will have bigger and bigger topics.
Oh, right? For sure, absolutely.
Yeah. So just to lay the ground, give you a little bit of a hint on what's coming. So Monday, I think the PSP and SDP will be here. So So we will answer some of the questions so you can let us know. And then I think Tuesday we are confirming the other parties, right? So hopefully they all come and then we can have a good discussion.
You're going to skip them. Sunday.
It's like, Sunday is a real. Oh yeah, Sunday is tomorrow is Jeremy lah. And check Bitcoin, right? Yeah. So the very iconic fun guy, at this point in time, we will get him, and we tried to get Daryl. Right, so the another independent candidate, and because we thought Sunday do something lighter get independent candidate, but Daryl not very open, so we'll see him after the election, hopefully, but yeah, so Jeremy will be coming tomorrow, and then there'll be the other parties will be coming in next week, and then we will lead towards bigger and bigger topics towards the end. So stay with us, okay? And once again, I want to give a shout out to our live stream partner, Position 5. So they've been supporting us through this whole process, make my life very simple, right? And also the partners at Community and the Golden Nuggets podcast. Yes. So
and for viewers on Instagram, Optimal Experience is on YouTube.
YouTube. Yes. And I think the earlier panel and this panel we will both post-produce onto our podcast. So yeah, stay tuned. You will get to enjoy because we do think some of these things are more pertinent, more important topics, and we want to hold the policy ideas to account. Okay, so yeah, joining me again is Adrian. You want to give for our audience that don't know you?
LinkedIn top noise, author, fractional CMO.
Just to be clear, everywhere you also say you're LinkedIn top noise, right? Don't just stay here,
I know, everywhere.
Okay.
It's publicly available.
Okay, great. And we are joined with Ern Ser and Alex. For our audience that don't know you, can you just do a quick introduction?
Okay, my name is Ern Ser. I'm a sociologist and academic, and I prefer to think in terms of ideas and models and principles, rather than very specific things and details.
Are you a sociologist or the sociologist?
I wish I am the, but I'm not.
After this episode become
after. So there was the Beng Huat era, and then there was your era, right? And then
but Beng Huat is really the grandfather of sociology in
Singapore.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And that's why he dared to say.
Maybe one of the uncles around.
Yeah. So we will go into that in a while. And Alex, for our audience that don't know you.
Hello, I'm Alex, former regulator, former CFO and chief actuary for insurance company. Now I'm an independent actuarial consultant.
So how does it feel from a regulator and then now you come out independent? It's like the whole thing already.
Well, I think I'm very fortunate in my career, so I get to see both sides of the fence, right? So give me a more holistic view. I think it's good.
Okay, that is fun. And in our other podcasts, I think Alex did the whole discussion about healthcare plan and all that. So we had a good discussion. I think it's great to take a look at that podcast, to get a better sense of so where do all these parties stand on their healthcare strategy, right? Because I do think it's an important part of, especially the professional life. You're spending a big bunch goes to that, so you want to know why is it like that, what's going on, right? Can we do something about it? So check out that podcast. In this particular podcast and panel, we want to focus on the housing plan, right? So I think housing is the other big thing
the most expensive thing in your life.
Yeah, it is until you calculate the insurance premium. right. Then you realize, hey, actually, yeah. I think in the psyche of Singaporeans, housing is front and center, right? A lot of people work very hard to get their home, and even marriage is tied to home, and there's the whole home asset enhancement, that the whole spiel for many, many decades, right? And then even leading up to recent times when there's actually Prime Minister Lawrence popped the bubble and said that, oh, no more asset enhancement, if things are 99 years, we'll go to the end. So actually all these are very hot topics, that people care about, and it's changing the whole public housing system, and then it's front and center in a lot of our conversation now, right? So it's also some of the most popular topics on our platform. So yeah, very happy to be here to discuss with all of you. So maybe Ern Ser, you can take a jab at this. So maybe help us understand, right, lay out the land. How are you looking at the situation today with the public housing scheme?
Well, I tend to link public housing to our attempt, right, in Singapore to sort of raise a middle class. Essentially, you want to be a middle-class society, right? A middle-class society means that you want to live well, you want to own something, a property, and also to be able to experience upward mobility. And the fact is that with the kind of public housing system that we have, it actually enables a lot of people to move up the social ladder, right? I mean, personally, for me, right, I used to live in slum housing in my childhood.
Humble background.
And then I moved say again?
Humble background.
I'm not standing for election, so it's okay.
Hey, your slum housing will win already.
Yeah, slum. It's not humble. It's not very humble.
Yeah, I thought people don't care anymore. Anyway, what I'm trying to say here is that it allows you to move up. And so what's wrong with that? So it's very much in tune with being a middle class society, or wanting to be a middle class society. And ownership is a good thing, I believe. But of course, along the way, because when you own something, you want to be able to sell it, right? And if you sell in the open market, you get your capital gain, or whatever terms you want to use, right? And eventually, it just gets more expensive, right? And so the next generation will tend to, in a sense, suffer, right? Because price has gone up so much. Years ago, when you buy a 4-room flat, maybe it only cost you like 100,000, or maybe even 80,000, But now, it is at least even BTO is still 400-500. Maybe in some places it could be 700.
Yeah.
Right. In terms of location. Yeah, so that becomes, at one time it's our pride and joy, right? But now I think some people don't experience much joy, when they talk about public housing. But it's a matter of perception. I think it need not be seen as a problem. But of course, if people do experience it as a problem, then we have to recognize that, right?
But with that kind of price tag, it's very hard not to be a problem.
Yeah. I think HDB also does try to calculate affordability, right? So what do you mean by affordability? It's like X something times your median income, right? And I guess is whether you agree with that calculation or not. But I mean, it sounds possible, but some people may say, come on, in the old days, I get it much cheaper, right? But then in the old days, your salary was much lower too.
So that is the narrative, right? So I think HDB is going at 5. Right, that is the number that they think is acceptable, right? Times 5. But I think you laid it up for me lah. So the Workers' Party believes that it's 3. Right, so that is the platform that they want to be. And also just to kind of round off that discussion around, olden days you don't make a lot of money, and relative to the housing prices, it's okay. But correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like in the past, and not too past ago, like 20-30 years ago, mortgages are not that long. People are not taking like 25, 30. Now it's like, don't have 30 years mortgage. Don't need to talk, that type of energy, right? So when HDB peddles a narrative that say, oh, no out-of-pocket money, I was like, okay, I get it, no out-of-pocket cash, everything's from CPF. But the idea is the people are taking 25, 30-year mortgages, and the discount rate against your asset appreciation will be massive, because you need to pay interest, right? So how do you kind of square that?
Housing is meant to be housing, right? It means you just stay there and then, make it into a home, right? As comfortable as possible. But at the same time, it's also seen as an asset, as sort of an investment that has very low risk. Okay, so it is only rational, I think, for people to say, I better invest in this thing, right? Because it's a show-win kind of situation. But then again, we know that it may not be show-win, right? Because there's the problem of decaying lease. Right, at some point, it's not worth as much as you wish you could get from the open market.
And to be fair, I think Prime Minister Lawrence was the one that popped the bubble, right? Because before that, it was the asset enhancement narrative. So it is not to say that during the asset enhancement narrative, there were nobody that lost money, right? But it's just the broad narrative, right? During Chok Tong's period, Senior Minister Goh Chok Tong's period. Yeah, Emeritus. Yeah, okay. During the previous Prime Minister's period, that was the narrative, right? And I believe every politician needs a platform, every leader needs a story. So that was the platform of asset enhancement, and a lot of people bought into that, and that kind of rallied, up lah, right? And of course, the recent rally is not because of him, right? But that narrative stuck through the people, right? Where it's like, oh, just buy only, 包价 one, it's like that's because it translates down to the ground as like, oh, sure win, but I mean, we're not saying it is lah, but that's the kind of energy. And then
I think at one time people were talking about upgrading all the time, right? I mean, I think in the 80s, in the 90s, it's always about upgrading. And at one point also, in fact, nobody were buying 3-room flat, and the government actually stopped bidding 3-room flat. Right, but now we are back to bidding 3-room flat again. So the thing is that I mean, time has changed. A lot of the good stuff that we experience, the upward mobility, the upgrading,
From your point of view, essentially, for lack of a better way to put it, the social contract has changed, right? Between the people and the housing ecosystem, where in the past you can see as a mobility, from that point of view, especially for the middle class, right? But now it just looks like it's a use value, right? Or what the people on the streets would like to call it. It's just use value law. Just think of it as use value, and then you'll be like at ease with it. Right. I know we did a podcast with Beng Hua the other time and also talk about this, like, okay, there's a two-part to housing in Singapore because you allow for resale market, it fetches some sort of a volatility in the market and it has a price, right? So is that a fair statement to say that it has changed for the people, it's no longer the same?
It's a certain trajectory, right? I mean, if you go at this, go down this route, right, this is going to happen. Okay. And of course, for the longest time, I mean, people don't feel it. They actually experience a gain, right?
Quite sure.
I mean, it happens, you see, but the thing is that it comes a time where it's not sustainable anymore, right? So what do you do? So on one hand, we also don't want to pull down the value of the count of the flats that people are already in, right? And at the same time, we also want to make sure that BTO is affordable. So how do you take care of both ends?
Yeah.
Right? You are not going to distort the market in order to be able to make everything cheaper, right? So the only way I think the government has been using is giving out grants, right? So the price remain, right? You keep the price, but then you make it more affordable for people to be able to buy.
You exactly point out the crux of the matter, right? Is that there's a whole generation of people that is struggling to get on the ladder. Right, and struggling in all facets of it, because it's not just no money. Some people, they just don't meet the requirement, and there's a change of, you can call it lifestyle. I think people want to get married later, and I think the high stakes game of BTO, I call it high stakes game because essentially to get the BTO, you must get married and then you must find the right person. Everything stacked together, so it's called high stakes in my worldview. So when anytime something is high stakes, right, it take a long time to pull the trigger lah. It's not so easy, right? So then the thing get kicked down, right, and it's causing difficulty of a generation, or at least I think my generation and one generation younger, like the younger millennials and the Gen Zs, they are all feeling like this is not real, it's out of reach, cannot be done, right? So there's that. And then the other side of the discussion is that, okay, we want to manage the resale price value in the market, right? So these are two parts, right? One is the entry people, the other side is the exit people, right? You want to manage the resale price so that the generations above of Singaporeans that have dumped their CPF in it, or cannot use the word dump, like put their money, their CPF money in the house, thinking that it will be an asset enhancement. Of course, the narrative has changed, but that is what they subscribe to long before. And we know housing is a long tail thing, right? And you want to kind of protect them as a society. You don't want to see the secondary market come down, and it's gonna, be horrible for them, right? So with that as the background setting, you think that the government's strategy of the day is reasonable?
Over time, in fact, the government have introduced a number of changes, right? Like for example, there was a time when people really want to go private, and so what they came up with was HUDC and then
EC, all those,
So I think they're trying to cater to all kinds of demographic in Singapore. And then now we're talking about building 2-room flexi, right, to cater to seniors. So you don't see an authority, a government that is just sitting there and then waiting for things to happen, right? They are making all kinds of adjustment along the way over the last 60 years. Right. And right now, I mean, because there's the demand by singles, right, I think they also try to accommodate them, but maybe not far enough, but they do try to accommodate them.
So that is the lay of the land, right? So we've laid the ground. So let us look at some of the party manifestos, and what do the different...
Haven't tried Alex.
Any thoughts from
I really
you?
think that there's a
You really think the answer say everything already?
Strong need to get people to understand that the price that you pay for a 99-year lease property is really prepaid rent, right? And once you hammer the idea into people's mind, then I think there will be some natural price adjustment. So let's take the 400,000 HDB flat, let's say at entry level. If you convert that into what is the rental terms that you lock in for 99 years, is $340. How is that expensive? It is not expensive, right? But as with many of this private equity or private debt kind of investment, or like Berkshire Hathaway, right, get good yield oftentimes because they have that ability to deploy a large sum. So some people want to show the good deals to them. Things that are priced attractively is only accessible to people who have a big lump sum to pay out upfront, right? So I think at the moment, a lot of the problem is accessibility issue. Many of the young people would not have idle cash of 400,000 to stand around to capture this or lock in this good rental deal.
Is there some Bitcoin entrepreneur?
Enough. That's like our running gag for the whole season. Okay.
Yeah, so the thing is how to allow people to get onto this train, right, with minimal upfront. I think no cash out upfront is fine, right? In fact, instead of allowing them to borrow and repay on a level basis, you can also structure the loan such that the repayment is on increasing basis of in line with expected salary increase, right? Maybe for young people, you can also allow them a much more favorable loan to value ratio, right? Lower upfront. I mean, I still believe that a lot of these grants, I prefer to see it as investment into the next generation, and we should not be stingy about that.
And to your first point, does it also mean that, because for the longest time, it's always been about ownership, or you should own a home, own an asset, so people will defend the country, that kind of stuff.
Prepaid rent is also an asset in your accounting terms, right? Prepaid expense is an asset. Well, there's nothing wrong with that, right? And the asset appreciation narrative still works in the sense that if the market rental continue to increase, then the rental times the number of remaining period can still increase, right? At least in the front end, right? Of course, towards the tail end, there will be the decay, but the decay is respecting the contract that you have signed, right? You cannot be buying on the assumption that someone would come and save you by negating the contract. That is, you're buying an option. If you're trying your luck, then sometimes you win, sometimes you don't.
And I think that's also a part of the discussion because you see the different parties, including the PAP, trying to manage this thing because it is a broken social contract in some level, right? With the asset enhancement narrative that has changed, kind of normalizing back to what a usual 99 years will be, right? So when that narrative has shifted, they are also trying to manage that downside, unhappiness with sirs, with verse, and everybody. So actually it's three part to this housing situation, right? One is the getting the young people on it, making it accessible. The other part is trying to make sure the asset value stays relatively intact. You don't need to be very wealthy, but you don't want anybody to really kena, big part as a result of public housing, and the last part, you want a kind of like a soft landing for people to exit. Let's say they have a fast decaying asset.
I would put unpopular opinion though. So how much you can rely on the social contract narrative depends on, or there's a limit to it. Just like there's a limit to free speech and whatnot, right? Yeah. You cannot claim social contract to an extent that you ignore legal contract terms that it is 99 years that you have signed.
I agree.
Right? So people have to take some responsibility to how far you extrapolate that social contract narrative.
But the interesting part is every party is, in some shape or form, talking about it, right? In all some shape or form. So PAP, through HDB, of course, because they are the ruling party, has talked about verse, but it's very
No details yet lah.
no details. I'm of the view that it will not work. Okay, because you need I think the details so far is about 70% of people need to agree, and you're not being paid a premium, you're being paid a discount relative to SIRS, right? So like SIRS is that's all the details I have, right? SIRS is the fun one that everybody loves. It's like, wow, not bad, I get a nice new place and get some things back, right? So SIRS is the one that everybody like, and then verse is the one that it's like, so you get less lah, but then you must make sure everybody want it. But if anybody has done an en bloc exercise, it's crazy, right? To get everybody to want to do this together, there'll be the auntie down there say, I always feel very long already lah, boy.
I grew up here.
Yeah. And then there'll be the other uncles like, I bought it because I want to en bloc, so there's all sorts of incentive at play to get 70% of the whole building to come together to take an inferior, reward, right? In that sense, it's very hard. So I don't think verse will work, and I mean, maybe you can fill us in if you have some thoughts, but I'm of the view that maybe that is also why there's not a lot of details that are coming out yet lah. It's like HDB probably still modeling and thinking of what is done, because this thing has been like thrown out there for a while already.
I mean,
right?
the likelihood is that it won't be as good as SIRS, for
Yeah,
sure.
lor. So that's the
Even if we follow the SIRS model, I know. But I think we should also recognize that the en bloc thing that was sort of very popular in those days. People see it as still baby, right? More or less, right? I think it works because people were younger, the flats were also younger, and therefore you actually gain, you know what I mean, and you also can afford to move. So even if they say, hey, pay another 40,000, it's no big deal, right? Because you get another 99-year leasehold. So what's wrong with that? But by the time it gets to a more recent time, right, the flats owner are much older and they don't have the cash, the disposable income to be able to put in another 40,000.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And then moving to another flat, and that costs more. I mean, how are they going to afford it? I think the solution, which I think the government has tried, is to now have varying leases, right? So whether it's 30 years, 50 years, 60 years or what. And I think that works fine. I mean, like when you are 80, right, I think 30 years is okay. I mean, assuming that you don't live...
Very changming, right?
Anyway, life expectancy currently for women it's about 84, 85. For men it's about 80, 81, right? So if you work on that, right, at 80 years old you get another 30 years on that is wonderful.
You're fine.
More than enough.
Yeah. And that would essentially normalize the affordability element.
You don't have
because
to pay upfront huge amount.
Yeah, you don't front load that part.
In fact, instead of just giving people a new flat, say 20-year lease and whatnot, why can't, for these older people who may actually enjoy the camaraderie with their neighbor, reimburse or compensate them in kind? So move them to a elderly community where they can live together. I promise to take care of all the living expenses, right, until you pass on.
Sembawang.
Could be.
No, the black and white houses, I know SLA is trying to do some silver co-living over there.
Could be that. Then you remove all the remaining lease issue, right? Because you promise to take care of the person until he or she passes, right?
I think we are already, begun the discussion already. A little bit of color across the board on the different housing plans. So maybe we can continue that conversation about the lease decay element, since we are already high on it, right? So I think the PAP plan, there are two, right? One is the lease buyback, right? So you don't decay lah, you sell me first, right? Then you shorten that, and then if you really need it, you buy a variable lease, right? 20, 30 year flexi flat, right? So that is one method. The other one is the verse one, which is like not out yet, and I'm of the view that it doesn't work lah. But when HDB launch it, please come, we can talk, okay? And then there's the other one where the WP will suggest a universal buyback scheme, right, which essentially means you exit back to HDB, or if they were to run HDB, you exit back to HDB, and then what they are saying is they will then use the flats that are being bought back, because the government can hold stock and then reutilize it through some sort of a rental structure, so that you manage your operational costs as you hold stock lah, right? Essentially your negative carry, right? So that's the WP's plan. And then I think for PSP and SDP, they never talk as much about this buyback situation or the buyer of last resort. They are trying to remove the land price right from the start, right? So they have a very different structure, right? So there's that. Any comments on the buyback situation?
Buyback, I think, is always important to allow, especially the elderly, to exit and reap the equity. I think it's fine, right? I think the land cost one, you don't have to do it via removal of the land cost, right? I mean, I talk about allowing young people to get their first BTO, get their first flat in an affordable entry point, right? You can just recalibrate the size of the subsidy to negate the land cost, because I still feel that having that land cost sort of transparency, right, is still a decent management accounting practice.
In what sense? Maybe help us understand.
So even if they think that the land cost is high, right, but at least when you sell the new flat to the young people, be it single or young family, right, you may even able to bump up that subsidy big enough to offset the land cost you have charged to it, but you keep the accounting intact.
I understand what you're saying. I don't have a strong point of view on that front, and I think the government is really trying to do that, right? The subsidies in the front is quite thick already, right? But I think one thing that you said even earlier in the podcast is the one about escalating mortgage repayment, right? I think that one is not in anybody's manifesto. I think that one is good.
Yeah, so carry on that point, right? People may be limited to, let's say, just buying a four-room flat at the start, but if upfront they actually wanted a big family, by having a more generous support, right, allowing a better loan-to-value ratio, allowing in escalating repayment, they may be able to just buy that five-room flat outright. After that, they will just stay there forever. So then the mindset will become usage. And the other thing about making this usage front and center is that we may sort of enforce a disclosure regime such that when you sign any whatever sales and purchase agreement, you always are required to insert one clause to say that it's equivalent to rental of how many dollars a month until end of the 99 years. So that people would actively compare that rental amount with the current market price. Up to a certain point, they say that, okay, this annualized amount no longer makes sense. I will stop paying such a high amount for this transaction. So it would have a natural control of the resale price, I think.
Hey, welcome to the Financial Coconut Podcast Network. I'm your host, Reggie, aka your Chief Financial Coconut. And if you're loving what we're creating here, like, share, subscribe, share with your loved ones, comment in the comment section below. And yeah, we'll see you for great content on Chills with TFC. Echoing something just now that we were talking about, which is I think these days HDB has found comfort in selling shorter lease, right? And it's not a new discussion. It's been around, and you already see it in the flexi flat. Now I think it's just about, and even you already see industrial land, right? So there are always varying land tenure and lease time, right? So the WP has brought up this idea of 70 years HDB flats, which is not new, but I think what they're trying to say is universal. You don't sell 99, you sell 70, right? So any thoughts on this front?
Well, I think as long as you have a lease, it means that you will decay, right?
Yeah,
At some point.
No, but I think the difference is that the upfront cost, right? Lower entry, you adjust that.
My view is that by the time you get there, I think you might feel quite differently. I thought recently in somewhere, some people actually bought private housing for 60 years, right? I can't remember the details. And now it's like they only have 5 or 10 years left. And it's going to be zero, no? Even though it's private housing. When it's new, you feel okay. You say, hey, another 70 years,
Still
right?
far
But
away,
once you get nearer the date, you may feel quite differently. But having said that, I do agree that, upfront, I mean, if you can't afford to pay the whole amount, then I think it's a good idea, right? And that may also drive home the idea that it's actually rental for 70 years.
But actually, I'm not so keen on the 70-year narrative, though, because let's say if someone at age 20 buy the flat, and what Prof mentioned that the expected lifespan is already near 85, and that's the average. So there's a fair chance of people living beyond 90. You wouldn't want to enter in the discussion of your lease ending before you die. right? So I'm not really in favor of setting it at 70.
Okay,
So a better plan is 80 years.
yeah, it's,
It's just to give more support for people to get that 99-year
No,
flat.
I think either way, right? Because either you sell less or you give more so that the person buy more. Either way, it comes back to the same, right? Because you account it for similar way. There's no outside subsidies relative to it, right? So it's a similar accounting. So okay. I mean, a novel idea, but remains to be discussed, right? And then we can see what's there. Because if you push the conversation a bit more, then maybe 80 years. If most people are buying at 30 years old, 80 is not too bad, right? So that could be something, and then you can kind of like allocate the capital to like your CPF or whatever. Because I do think truth of the matter is, whoever runs the government, they might give you subsidies to put you on the ladder. They're not gonna give you cash to put inside your CPF. So if you buy a 99-year flat, they can give you the 100,000, 200,000 subsidies to get you on the ladder, but so that still means that you're gonna put a 200,000, into the flat, right? As compared to if you just outright buy less, then you got excess capital you can deploy in another environment, right? So that could also be a thought process. Okay. Maybe one other thing that it's a bit more interesting that maybe not usually discussed amongst our community is the ethnic integration policy, right? So I'm sure Prof, you're the best guy to ask. So
right.
WP, I think SDP,
SDP.
I'm not sure. I don't think PSP said this, but I think I'm definitely sure WP and SDP has both suggested some sort of a review. Okay, so to be clear, WP suggests to review the ethnic integration policy for resale flats. STB suggests abolish ethnic integration policy, right? So, do you want to expound on
I
the
think
situation?
abolish should be going a bit too far, lah. I think the idea, but I thought the government has actually come up with a plan, right? That if you can't sell, is that the issue? That means you can only sell it to a Malay or to an Indian, right? And therefore you find that the market is really small, right? So they say worst case scenario, the last resort is sell it back to the HDB at I suppose at market price, lah, right? So there is some solution for that, but I think the idea of EIP, right? I mean, although you can say that why are we so hung up about race, right? I mean, but the point is we are not really in a post racial world. Right? Race still matter, right? And if you leave people alone, I mean, the chances are they will actually hang out together. I mean, birds of a feather, So you don't really want that to happen, right? So basically is to facilitate and to encourage people to mix around, to have more social mixing across racial group. And I think that's a good thing. So maybe someday we may not need EIP, but I think we're not there yet.
But the social mixing still actually makes sense because in a community setting, more kampong spirit, people will still hang around, talk to each other. But nowadays, you go home, you close your door, you lock it, you don't even talk to your neighbor.
I think it requires a lot more intervention, bringing people together, whether it's community garden or, doing projects together. I think the literature will suggest, sociology literature suggests that, you try and bring people together and not just sort of chit-chat among themselves, right? But more to get them to do work on common projects, participation on common projects for the community, right? So it's about doing things together. It's not just about bringing people together. Because you bring people together doesn't mean that they're going to interact. Okay, or if they interact, doesn't mean that they're going to integrate.
And to be fair, I think the newer BTOs, HDB also try to connect them digitally. They got like WhatsApp group and then some people say, "Well, my WhatsApp group very toxic." Because very competitive, right? But you and that's a reason why people say good neighbors are hard to come by, right? Because you don't ballot for your neighbors.
Yeah, so you have offline and online,
everything, right? So I think it's kind of
cyber community.
And I think it's all kind of like moving down that path, and then to be fair to HDB, right? I think they have really updated the way they build flats over time also, right? Even from the way they angle things, and all these are like built environment type of
Very deliberate.
yeah, very deliberate. You can see the difference from the Sterling Road flat all the way until the earlier like Hougang flats or Tampines, the old flats they look a certain way, and then the newer estates there's the garden in the middle, that whole like flow, right? I think that's a fair statement, right? Yeah. So I think it's all. Would you say it's all? I mean, you would know, like, is it all geared towards the kind of like social integration and connection?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, it's not just a place to live, right, but it's also a place to connect. We don't want neighborhood to be just neighborhood. We want them to become communities. Yeah.
Is it effective now so far based on the literature that you've
Well,
seen?
I think based on evidence, actually, is working.
Okay.
It is working.
Okay, that's
that
good.
people are mixing. Of course, there were times when they think everyone shut the door and then they're just doing their own thing, right? It's not really true, I know. Studies on social network now show that actually people are connecting, but of course still room for improvement, right?
Okay.
I mean, people still do sort of birds of a feather flock together, right?
Course,
So
of
we
course.
want them to do, the technical term to use, like, not only do they have bonding capital, right, among themselves, but also bridging capital, right? They used to bridge out to a more diverse kind of network, lah.
So maybe we can talk about the elephant in the room, which is the whole like removing land price style situation, right? So this is as we move further and further out from the PAP and WP's parameter, right? So for PSP and SDP, specifically for PSP, I think they want to create a structure where you do not front load the land cost. Right, so that means you just pay building cost plus a premium. I think Manwai and Hazel has talked about it in Parliament, right? So you do that, and then when only in a point of sale, when you want to sell, then you pay the land price such that the whole thing then exits into the secondary market, similar to how other flats are. Right, so any thoughts on this front?
I think he actually addressed that, right? I think because for accounting purpose, I think it's good to know, the price of everything, lah, or value, whatever term you use, right? Because if you sort of don't take account of that, and then in a way you are, I don't know, somehow I feel something is missing, in terms of accounting, lah.
But accounting sounds a bit, I mean, I'm going to push you a bit on this, right? So accounting sounds a bit like a professional term, right? But this is the live life of people, right? So I mean, for them to even bring up something like that, it goes to show that for a lot of people, affordability is a problem. Or maybe not everyone, but for a significant part of the community, right, or the Singaporeans, it is a struggle. So I mean, that's why they're kind of like bringing up this idea, right? So how about we, affected the land costs later? Anyway, if you exit the market, then you do it, right? If not, then essentially the state does not get to monetize, that land through you, lah, right? Because you live in that space, you never exit the market, you will take it from start to end, and then that's the end.
Because in a way, you're telling people, I cannot make it cheaper because of accounting.
Yeah. It's a bit like
not very convincing.
You know what I mean, Prof? I mean, I don't discount your views. Yeah?
No, and that's why the government's method is to use grants. That means we need to account for everything, right? Land costs, building costs, whatever costs, right? To make it more affordable, we give different sorts of grants, you see. I think that is a more sensible method.
And all the discussion about land cost still boils down to whether can you afford to pay for it, right? All the land cost discussion can be abstracted away. The population don't even have to care about it, right? It's just focused on whether the price, let's say, looking at it from a 99-year locked-in rent terms perspective, does it make sense, right? If it makes sense, then honestly, it's not too expensive, right? Then if the problem is about coughing up in that money upfront, then just solve the problem via a more generous loan terms, and that will have solved the problem, and you don't even have to discuss land costs at all, so long as that headline number is correct.
Can I just say one more point?
Yes.
Actually, we forgot to talk about CPF, right? Because you see, when the ownership scheme first came out, right, it was paired with CPF. Because without CPF, a lot of people cannot afford anything anyway.
Correct.
All right, so it does help people to pay, right? And I think even currently up to now, right, there are some people who are actually paying nothing every month because it's CPF and maybe, I don't know, whatever cash or what, right? So it's a small amount, yeah? So without CPF, I think it'd be hard, even in those days, for people to buy a 3-room flat,
In fact, it's a very good point. So just now I mentioned that the long-term rental price that's locked in is actually not expensive, but if people have to, let's say, borrow or use their CPF, then the sense check should also include the loan interest cost, or if you're using CPF money, the opportunity
Accrued
cost
interest.
of not having it invested in CPF, such that the whole stack that gross or total rental cost long term that you lock in, is it still a fair amount? If it's still fair, then I think the price of the flat is still fair.
So I don't think this is on the different parties' manifesto, but they have said it from time to time that they, at least for PSP and WP, because they have a seat in Parliament, so they have from time to time, or I stand corrected if they don't, but I'm quite sure I remember that from time to time they have suggested the idea of like decoupling CPF and HDB, right? Where essentially, because a big part of the, so it's back to the triangle, right? Of like affordability, and then like we want to protect asset value, and then we want to allow the older people to exit the market in a safe way, right? So there's this part where they're saying, okay, if let's say you decouple it from the flats, and the CPF can run on its own, then it does not carry a snowball risk where at some point, if the property market has a big correction.
No, what does it mean?
Yeah.
Does it mean that that means don't allow people to use CPF?
I think,
which is a sort of contradiction, right?
In some way. In some ways, I think that's what it means. It means you can either do it two ways, right? Either you don't allow people to use it in CPF, and then just manage the kind of costs from the front, right? In the sense, you can always give out more grants, right, if you want, right? Or you can cap the participation of CPF inside, or you can just outright reduce the price all the way that there's no need for consideration of exploring CPF as a mechanics, right? So that is something that people are talking about, to essentially separate it.
But that logic, they're still trying to tie the house to as investment asset concept, right? Because if you are going back to a long-term use concept, why do you care whether the price go up or go down? I've already locked it in.
So now this is the new idea. There is an old system that is happening. You cannot just not care about the old system, right? In that sense. And then this is the kind of evolution of thought that some of the parties are pushing, right? But it looks like it's...
If that's the case, then to help the transition is to first hammer in this use
of course. Okay. I can agree.
And while today the property prices still remain decently high, then you just choose to exit to whichever property that you think would be reasonable for your long-term use. It's a good timing to exit, to do the reset, right? And if the economy were to go significantly worse, and you ask people to make the transition there, and then it become more painful.
Maybe we move on to the last one, which is SDP. SDP one is the most like, as with SDP right? But you did say, okay, in our previous podcast, we did talk about the STB healthcare plan to be very rigorous. It's just that there are certain assumptions that maybe the state today is not comfortable to go with, and of course, it's up to you. And
also, they have a very strict worldview about this, about redistribution,
about redistribution,
which not everyone may subscribe to. Yeah.
So that's the part that needs continuous discussion, and in some ways, it is their job to then push the ideas to the people, right? So that is for the STB to do it. So once again, STP, they want to introduce a non-open market flat mechanics, right? Essentially means that there's no more secondary resale market, right? You buy, sell direct through the HDB, and the price is compressed, right? All the way to pretty much a build cost plus a premium. So reference price is about 70,000 to a few hundred thousand, to like 100, 200,000, right? Depending on flat size. Any thoughts on this front?
Maybe we can allow some of that, but maybe not as universally all flats become like that, right? Because could be that kind of model or typology, whatever you call it, will work well for some people.
So you actually think
so
that
in other words, we can always retain other models still, working side by side, simultaneously.
So from your point of view, you think that there is space for something like that?
I believe so, and if there might be takers.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
But of course, they have to go in with their eyes open. They can't sell in the open market. Yeah. All right. If they pay 200,000 for it, at the end, of course, they get something back, but won't be certainly not asset enhancement in any way.
So I guess it's a good reiteration that you're just renting, take away the ownership and everything.
Yeah, so you have different models operating at the same time.
And you
Nothing
think
wrong with that.
and you think that it is okay for the HDB to move down this path?
I would say so.
From your point of
so.
view, okay.
Yeah.
So in some sense, we are maturing into multiple systems of live and flat types, right? Okay. So it's just a different model. There's no right or wrong. I mean, there's right or wrong based on your political positioning and your thought process lah. But
and whether currently you're owning the flat or not.
and whether you're owning a flat, because the last thing you want is you own a flat and then there's a whole new, supply of these type of flats that come in, and then they may inevitably distort the market, right? So not out of their design, which is what, once again, back to the triangle, right? Of the things that you want to achieve. But okay, that is very interesting. There is one other thing that is I personally think is very interesting, which is the PSP's Millennial Apartment Scheme. So I don't think it's new to the psyche of Singaporeans, because by virtue that Leong Man Wai has a position in Parliament, he has sought multiple opportunities to kind of push this idea, right? And I do think that amongst the millennials and of course the younger people, it's quite a sexy idea, co-living. In simple terms, it is co-living, right? Like, it's like a cool place to rent and to just stay together, much like how co-living are, or even much like how dormitories, like school, university dormitories work, right? Then maybe you must do some community thing, collect points, then they can continue to stay, right? So you kind of like allow people to graduate out of that and into this new like millennial apartment scheme in the heart of the city centre. I do think there's some merit to this. Any thoughts from your point of view?
I think again, if there's another model, why not?
So different strokes for different folks
exactly.
like that. Okay.
Actually, using the millennial as a naming convention is a bit wrong, right? Because Gen Z right now, oldest is already 28.
Yeah.
This should really be a
millennials
Gen Z
should
kind
be
of,
leave already.
Yeah,
so it's a Gen Z housing scheme. Yeah. No, because I think there is something to be said, especially I think in Taiwan they tested something like that. I cannot remember, was it Taichung or Taipei they tried. Because as with all big cities, not unique to Singapore, the city centre is always very expensive. And as much as our government tries to build flats and all that, to try to essentially avoid enclaves lah, right? You don't want like rich enclaves. So you say like, okay, this circle it'll be a public housing. But because there's a secondary market in the Singapore public housing system, right, very quickly the price just like shoot up once it 5-year NOP exit into the market, right? So now, okay, they're going to delay to 10 years, right? But once it enters the market, it still inevitably allow market forces to come in to kind of scoop up the prime area and then indirectly create enclaves, right? And you can see whether is it Duxton, whether is it, what's the other one? The newer one nearer to Red Hill, that area, right? So it's all like the prices are just like woo, right? And when you go there, you see because they got viewing area, right? So I go and see them. Then I see the residents here, the way they talk, the very different pattern, like carry the cello with the kid. Oh, what we like to do today, that's like, okay, different group are here, right? The people live here differently, and by virtue of an open market system, you create such behaviors, right? So it is what it is. So when I thought about it, when I heard Man Wai talk about it, at first I was like, okay, just a rental scheme, right? But over time, as I think about it, maybe, there's some areas that we can circle up, and we don't give the people too much time here, you don't want them to entrench. You give them like a 3-year, like max. You can.
It's a transition.
Yeah,
thing,
it's like and then you're grinding your career, right? So in the early days when you're grinding your career, you graduate out of university, they go here, they can do whatever that they need to do, and then young people can work until very late one, right? But then you don't want to go back to Punggol, right? So sorry, Singapore is very small, but Punggol is still very far, right? Or like Tampines, right? So then you just go back to your apartment and could potentially help TFR. Right, great place to meet a lot of people, right? And I see that in co-living spaces. I have friends that stay in co-living spaces, they are very connected. There are all sorts of people that they know from all sorts of, how you know them? Oh, we all stay in the co-living, So we hang out, we chill, we chat, and it's a very university dormitory energy that is translated into the heart of the city centre for young professionals, right? I do think that is viable.
Given your explanation, these things seem to solve quite a number of issues.
I'm not sure if it
possibly.
ultimately does lah, but in my imagination, like 很像可以咯.
It doesn't have to be even city center, right? It could be, let's say, Boon King, a few stops away from town. It's already good enough. It's a good balance of cost to the government and whatnot.
And relative to space. And I mean, there's some of the older estates, right? Queenstown, Red Hill, some of these places, they also want rejuvenation, and those young people can go in and rejuvenate, right? And, so I think that there are there are some possibilities as a transitionary,
Correct.
and also for people that want to like make the big decision slightly later in life, right? So I think it is a good time to explore some of these things.
I wanted to pick
and
up on your point
evolve.
about after the MOP, then the city centre HDB become enclave.
Yeah.
Right? People can actually take comfort that second-hand buyer into this are going to suffer worse, least decay than you.
Of course,
Does it make you happier?
Relatively.
Relatively happier.
No, but they are the exit plan of the original people, right? And then to be fair, they also come in with their eyes wide open, right? Because you pay in the open market, right? And
But I suppose it's still cheaper than going private.
and
Definitely.
exactly. That's the part of the imagination that wasn't very well scoped out,
Right.
earlier. Because the intention is great, right? You think like, don't want all the condo here, let's do some HDB flat. Then who knows, right? The buyer profile thinks like, hey, wow, the condo there 3 million, this one 1.5, let's go.
Yeah.
I need to declare conflict. I stay in Pinnacle, Dustin.
So yeah, exactly. I was referencing.
Yeah, I said that, yeah.
I was referencing the Pinnacle. I was up there. I brought some friends up there, see the view. Then I take the lift. I was like, whoa, everybody here very sophisticated.
Important
The way
question, are
they
you the
talk.
first buyer or second buyer?
Yeah. First one, okay.
And intend to live until the end, right? So to me, the price of 1.5 million for my neighbor doesn't matter, right? Yeah, I'm not going to cash out. I cash out, where do I stay?
I think that's the reason why people also buy those $1 billion house or HDB, right? I mean, you got good location, good view. Come on, where can you get in private?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
The same.
I mean, all the Bishan $1 million is all by the Bishan Park. So beautiful. Last time, the longkang, who want to stay? Bishan Park used to be a longkang, right? And it's so smelly. But after they built out the whole thing, then all the $1 million flats are along the parks, right? So I think that's a function of, if we as a nation continue to choose that our public housing scheme will have a secondary market in the resale flat, all these mechanics are here to stay, right? And you try to like mix and match, try to manage it a little bit here and there. I think the annoyance is still not being able to hop on, and then maybe there's quite a big delay amongst a younger crowd, plus COVID, plus everything. So I think that's why PAP still stands by their position to say that, we want to build more flats. But to them, that is the solution, not changing the mix, right? So ultimately, it's for the voters to decide, what works for you, what you think is interesting. Any last words for our listeners?
I think we also, I know this is something that's quite unpopular, which is to say that, whatever we think about, whatever recommendation, we really need to think about the trade-offs. I know trade-offs are pretty inconvenient
Not popular. Not about.
for discussion purposes, among some people, right? But really, we have to consider that.
Of course.
Yeah.
It's an opportunity cost, right?
I mean, it's very easy to say, okay, we just want to have free this, free that. Can be done, but at what cost?
Yeah. Any last things?
I would still say continue to support the young people, let them have the opportunity to lock into this favorable long-term lease or long-term rent arrangement. And then after that, they can build their life around that.
Awesome. Okay. Adrian,
Great.
any last things?
I'm just very interested to see how this would evolve, and hopefully really for the younger people, they really have a choice to enter the market in a faster manner, in an affordable fashion, because contrast to my time where it was, this is not a problem during my time,
no,
but
it's not a
nowadays, and I really cannot imagine how it will be for my kids when they grow up.
Yeah,
it's
it's
going to be
true.
tough.
It's true. And I think there's also a lot of the anxiety amongst the voters, right? When they think about, okay, I managed to do it, but now it looks a bit crazier. And then like my kids in another 10, 20 years now, it's going to be even crazier. Or at least that's how they extrapolate, right?
Yeah.
Of course, things are not linear, right? But based on what it is, you extrapolate your thought to look at it. So, we have to do something now.
And
right?
another
So-
reason for people not to have kids.
Yeah. So 环环相扣, everything is connected,
Yes,
right? So
exactly.
had a great discussion.
And
Thank you.
don't always think that everything remain equal. No? They're not.
Yeah. Things will change. Okay.
There's a lot of moving parts, really.
There are. Thank you for your time. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank
you
you,
so
Ern Ser.
much.
Thank you, Alex. We had a great discussion. I really enjoyed today's panel. I think we handled some of the hard topics, that I'm sure the other podcasts cannot handle one. It's true. They all talk about this person, that person, right? So please share it with your loved ones, share it with the voters out there that are trying to make a decision. I think we had a very balanced discussion, objective view from a professional standpoint and from a lived experience standpoint. So yeah, let it roll. Let more people hear this, and we will republish these two podcasts that we recorded in the live over the course of the next week. So you can also share that podcast with your friends and family. So meanwhile, that's the end for today. We wish you well. I think next week onwards, there'll be more and more candidates coming on. So you will get to hear from them. And if you have any hard-hitting questions, let us know. We will deliver it to them. Okay, meanwhile, thank you. We'll
Thank you
see
so
you.
much.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.